Russia has spelled out a fresh condition for Ukraine security guarantee talks. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov has said Moscow must be involved in decisions about security guarantees for Ukraine. He asserted that discussing any Western security guarantees for Ukraine without Russian involvement is a road to nowhere. Lavrov says that security guarantees for Ukraine should be provided equally by the US, the UK and France. Now Russia has made an interesting proposal that China should also be part of the security guarantee. Moscow and Beijing have very close ties.
I believe that the West, and especially the US, understands perfectly well that seriously discussing security issues without the Russian Federation is completely unrealistic and a road to nowhere.
Lavrov made the comments 2 days after US President Donald Trump hosted Ukraine's president and European leaders for discussions about security guarantees for Ukraine that could help end the war. Lavrov also said that Moscow is ready to discuss the political aspects of a settlement with Ukraine. He went on to say that Russia is ready to conduct talks in any format and to raise the level of delegations in negotiations. But he repeated Moscow's insistence that any meeting of the Russian and Ukrainian leaders should be the culmination of such negotiations and will need to be carefully prepared. Lavrov's statement came as NATO defense chiefs are holding a virtual call to devise possible future security guarantees for Kyiv that could help forge a peace agreement. This comes even as Russia continues to pound Ukraine on the ground. Russia struck Ukraine's northern region of Sumy. The overnight attack injured at least 14 people, including a family with 3 children. Russia launched 15 drones in an assault on the Oktirka area. Fire has been raging in Ukraine's Odesa region, where Russian forces launched a massive drone attack near a fuel and energy facility. Authorities said a port infrastructure in the city was also damaged due to relentless bombardment. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis is a military expert and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. He is now joining us live from Starling, Virginia. Colonel Davis, good to see you and welcome. Russia is suggesting roping in China as part of security guarantees. How will that change the dynamics of the whole peace deal or the war in Ukraine?
Well, you know, I think it's a very interesting discussion and new elements into the conversation here, because Russia, Sergey Lavrov actually yesterday complained that all these talks about security guarantees for Ukraine and for the European Union, etc. He said, how can you have all these conversations about security guarantees to end the war and not have talks about Russian security guarantees? Because Russia also feels like, and from their perspective, the reason they entered this war, in fact, was because of the NATO coming into it, was because of what they viewed as being the Ukraine side oppressing the ethnic Russians that lived inside of their country, that they were attacking them in the east, etc. And they said, those are the root causes we have to address, and we have security guarantees as well. So far, the Western side hasn't even been willing to even say anything about Russian security guarantees, exclusively those of the Ukraine side. But the Russian side is saying, okay, we're willing to talk and potentially even accept Western countries into a peacekeeping force inside of Ukraine, which is a big change, by the way. That wasn't the case at all up until just very recently. But they say it also may need to include Chinese troops, and that could be a very bitter pill to swallow for anybody in the United States or Western Europe, to have actual Chinese soldiers come into a European country to provide security for the Russian side. It could well be that they're saying this because they know it's a bitter pill that the West will never allow, and so Russia may be saying, look, either you allow this one or we won't allow that one. It's not going to be one or the other. It's going to be both or neither. And Russia still remains in the position of power over the Ukraine side and the entire Western side writ large. So there's going to have to be some giving in on some things we don't want to, because right now we can't compel Russia to do what we want without something like Chinese troops in the conversation.
Colonel Davis, over the past month or so, we have seen an escalation of strikes on both Ukraine and Russia. What if a deal is not reached and this war grinds on? What happens? What are the ramifications to both Ukraine and Russia?
Well, see, that's what puts Russia in the superior position here diplomatically, because they can continue fighting. If no deal is reached that they like, they're okay with it. They continue to say that. Their ambassador in Abinzia in May reiterated on the UNSC floor emphatically that Russia will attain its objectives through negotiations, or they'll obtain it on the battlefield. They have said nothing besides that at any point. And so I think we have to believe that that's still their position, and we see it on the ground and in the air. As you mentioned a moment ago, Russia has the wherewithal, and they certainly have the industrial capacity and, crucially, the manpower to make good on that if they don't get a deal they like. Whereas on our side, if we don't get a good deal that we like, the Ukraine army itself, that's really the linchpin of this whole thing, is their physical force. They are losing more troops than they can force mobilize each month, and at some point there will come a place where they simply can't hold the line any further, and the Russian side, which has the manpower, can have its way. So if we don't get a deal, to answer your question, eventually Ukraine will lose the war.
All right. Colonel Davis, it's good to see you. We'll have to end this discussion there. Thank you for talking to us today.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.